So I have been a teacher for just under 10 years, and I teach at Tuxford High School. I've been an examiner as well as a marker, and have been approached by junior tuckies to give you these preparation strategies for your 3 papers. Now, when we talk about English in Tshwane South, we talk about English being the heartbeat of the school. So think about a heart for a second, not the emoji, the heart inside of you. That heart pumps blood to every single part of your body, even your very tippy toes and your pinky finger. Okay? Now, what do they mean by that? They mean that if you are able to read and express yourself in an accurate way, you're able to do that not just for your English subject, but you're able to do that for every single subject. So that is why English is the heartbeat of the school. So, with the notes that you have received, you have each gotten a copy of last year's exam paper. Paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3. I've given this to you, and you will see why it is necessary that I've given it to you to work through. Additionally, I have a pack of notes which you can follow along with. You need to follow along with a pack of notes during the presentation. You can write on these notes. If you have any additional notes, you can write on the pad that you've been given. And afterwards, there will be some reflective questions that you can then go through when you prepare for your exams. You can re-go through these notes, and that should help you. Okay, it seems that everyone, with the exception of 2 people, have received their notes, so let's get started. What I want you to have in front of you is the notes that says English Preparation Strategies. And then in your hand, a pen. If you do not have your exam papers, there's about 4 or 5 of you who do not have exam papers. That is okay. We can always get you some more, and you can share if you need it. But the most important is to have the notes that say English Preparation Strategies. Everyone has a copy of that. Okay. So, paper 1. Paper 1 is our language exam. That is what I'm going to start with. Each paper I am going to compare to something. To paper 1, I am going to compare paper 1 to baking a cake. Has any of you ever baked a cake before? Okay. Well, some of you are fortunate enough to have baked cakes, and some of you are even more fortunate that in your future lies the opportunity to bake a cake. Now, you will know from baking that the key is in preparation. You prepare all your ingredients, you put them together, you take out your equipment, and you make sure that you've got your individual bowls with everything that you need to add at certain times. Sometimes some ingredients even have to be left at room temperature, so you have to prepare long in advance before you actually bake the cake. Then the next step is mixing it all together, and the last step is baking. So you will see I've put these 3 steps out on your notes. What am I comparing the preparation to? The preparation is these notes, these slides, and some of the work that you will do a few days before your paper. Okay? Mixing is the studying that you have to do for paper 1. You can also use these notes. These notes will tell you exactly what to study. And baking is what? Sleeping. Okay, so you will note that the preparation for paper 1 is a lot more than the studying for paper 1. And sleeping is important so that this does not happen. Okay? So here we have someone not enjoying a cake. 1 slice of cake, delicious. 2 slices of cake, wonderful. 3, now I'm starting to get full. Stuffing my face with an entire cake. There is no enjoyment. There is no nourishment. This means, people, that hour before you write paper 1, using that red and yellow book your teachers tell you to buy, that's not going to help you. Stuffing your face with all the information that you need for paper 1 is not going to help. You need to sleep the night before you write paper 1. You do your preparation, you do the small amount of studying for paper 1, you sleep, and then you go and you write. This is a very good guide for all your subjects. Sleep helps you to process things in your brain. So stuffing is never going to help you. Let's take a brief look at time. So that's the next picture I have there for you. You have 10 minutes reading time and you have 2 hours in total. A brief guide, you have 55 minutes for the comprehension, 30 for your summary. There's a question that I've asked you there which you can refer to later when you go through these notes. Your visual literacy can take you 30 minutes and then you have 5 minutes spare. And these 5 minutes you can use to go back to anything that you've missed and perhaps look over a few things. So, what is my 10 minutes useful for? It must be used for the comprehension. When you go through your exam paper with the chief invigilator, you satisfy your curiosity. You look through your summary, you look through your advert, you look through your cartoon. You see what the language is about. Now you put all of that out of your mind and you spend those 10 minutes on reading. This is not the time to wink at your friend, to stare at the shoes of the invigilator. No. This is used for your comprehension. This is 30 marks of the 70 marks. If you do not understand what is happening in this text, multiple questions will not be able to be answered. So you have to understand what is going on. If you look later on at the title of that section, it says Reading and Understanding Texts. Okay, so that is the most important thing. Now, how do I use these 10 minutes step by step? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this thoroughly. 10 minutes, people, this is our cheat. We're able to read it thoroughly, we're able to read it slowly because we have 10 minutes without a pen in our hand. What else can we do but read the comprehension as thoroughly as possible? And then the next thing that we're going to do is go to the questions, force ourselves to look at the questions and the mark allocations of the questions. And then the next thing that we do is we go back to the comprehension and we skim read. What do I mean by skim reading? We can practice. So if you see on your notes, I've taken a small bit out of the November 2023. So skimming is when you glance through the text, picking up a few words here and there. That's what it means to skim. So here you can write down I've asked you in your notes, what does this mean? I've given you a definition, and you can copy it down. So many of us do this the first time we read the comprehension, and then we only go and read the paragraphs that are referred to in the questions. This is not going to help you to actually answer the questions properly, effectively, and fully. This is why we do the double approach. Reading it thoroughly when there is nothing else to do but read. Reading the questions, skimming through the comprehension again. So, I'm going to show you how to skim. Follow with me in the notes. Listening, reading. Audiobooks, podcasts, voice note, generational shift, we understand the world. Insomniacs, okay, I see that there's a point there, I'll go back to it later. Dog owners, trudging around the park, do it in the gym, I've taken it to doing it in the car, long journeys through the dark, need distraction from everything circling in my head. Do you see that I'm not reading every single word? I'm just allowing my eyes to pick up certain words. Now, this does not help us if we haven't already read it properly the first time. Having read it properly the first time, we already have the general content, and now we're just familiarizing ourselves with the main ideas. We allow our eye and our brain to work here, just falling on the important words, not going over everything again. So people, even if your invigilator says your time has started, first follow this process. I know it works. So most recently, the way I know it works is because I too am studying. I am doing a course part-time. And there is a lot of reading involved in this course. And I have followed these same approaches, and it has worked for me. So I can tell you that it will work for you. Remember, it's a 30-mark component. So now, once you have skimmed through the comprehension, you go to question 1. And you're going to read question 1 aloud. Read question 1 aloud. How? You're in an exam. You're not allowed to make any noise. You cannot read it aloud. So let's practice reading aloud without making any noise. In your head now, none of you, make sure your mouth is completely closed. In your head, sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Let's all do it. Are you able to do it? Yes. Okay, so here's a little interesting nerd fact for you. When you sing aloud, you are using one part of your brain. When you sing the way you've just sung now, quietly, you're using 3 parts of your brain. The more parts of the brain that you use, the more you're able to process and understand something better. This means that you can read your questions aloud without making a sound. Let's practice it with the question that I've given you, 1.1 in your notes. Let's read it aloud together without making a sound. Okay, so you are able to do this, and by doing this, you're able to comprehend something a bit better. Now, the only catch is that it takes longer to read this way. So this tactic might not work for every single question. That is why it is so important to prepare before paper 1. And one of the ways that you prepare for paper 1 is to actually do a comprehension a few days, even the night before. you write paper 1. By practicing this, you're able to practice your timing and to see, okay, I'm a fast reader, I can spend more time on the questions. Oh, I'm a slow reader, I cannot use this technique for every single question, so I'm going to use it for the questions that I know are difficult. The 3-mark questions, the 4-mark questions, the questions that I do not understand immediately. So that is why prep is more important than studying in paper 1. Okay, so now once you have read through your questions and you're starting to answer all your questions, you're going to start with the process of highlighting and underlining the key words and the question words. Again, people, this takes practice. It might not be able to work for you for every single question. You need to practice through this text that I've given you, paper 1. Go through it, following all these steps. See how it works for you. Adjust. But if you understand what the question word is and what the key word is of the text, then you're able to answer the question very effectively. So if we look back at that question I've given you on your notes, why does the writer use it repeatedly in paragraph 1? Does anyone want to tell me what the question word is? Okay, so that is why. And then the next thing is what the key word is. So the key words here is it repeatedly. Not why the writer wrote paragraph 1, but why the writer used it repeatedly in paragraph 1. So the meaning of it in this paragraph is going to be what gets you the mark. Not he wants to inspire us to read. Although that is the point of the text, it is not why he repeatedly uses it. You would not be able to get your mark for this question if you did not know what the key word of the question is. So, practice later on, before paper 1, going through the paper and working out all the key words, all the question words, so that you can see. And the more you do this, the more skill you build in this way, the easier it becomes. So you're going to then use all of these key words, all these question words, you go through the entire text and you answer it. The questions will even refer back to some paragraphs, some lines. You can go back to those lines, go back to those paragraphs. If you do not understand something in those paragraphs, in the lines that the questions refer to, read it aloud. Okay, read it aloud without making a sound so that you can try and understand it better. Okay, I've said that and I have said that. The key is our cake metaphor. So if you turn to your next page, you see I've given you all the notes that I've spoken through in the presentation. I want to refer to the final question of the comprehension. But do you see that I've also included a text box there for you? These are the main question words that you get in a comprehension. In your own time, you can go through these question words, looking through them and making sure that you understand what they are. For example, there is a very big difference between comparing something and defining something. There is a very big difference between comparing something and commenting on something. So go through this at a later stage. This is why I say these notes will help you with studying. So you get many different types of questions, as I've said, in this text, but I want to specifically speak about the scary one. So we have the questions that they give us on text B. So this is usually a picture of some sort. Now, a sneaky tip to remember for text B is that they are actually leading you to a specific answer. So make sure you refer to the questions of text B when you look at the final question in the paper. So the examiner does this. So an examiner is the person who sets the paper. And what they are trained to do is actually to lead you to a certain idea within the paper. That is why the questions, you will note, usually start off with the beginning of the comprehension and they end off with the end of the comprehension. You will also note that the questions get increasingly difficult. So they start off with the easy questions and then they become more and more complicated as it goes on. Now, right at the end, you get given a comparative question. This is the one where you have to compare text A to text B. This is the easiest question in the entire comprehension, but it is often thought to be the hardest because it is not approached in the correct way. The first thing that you have to realize, and I know this because in the past 10 years of teaching, I have read the memos for every single grade 12 exam paper. And I have seen that for this comparative question, they always compare positively to one another. Always. You have to find the link. But the comparison is always positive. So when they ask you, does text A link to text B? You always say, yes. You do get credited if you say no. The memo does tell me that I'm allowed to mark alternative responses. But why make it complicated for yourself? Look for the link. Say that they do compare. Okay. And now, the next step that you do after you've said yes is you summarize the main content of text A and you summarize the main content of text B. Be careful though, very recently they have started to introduce a little trick for you, and this trick is that they refer to a specific paragraph. So make sure that you're looking at your question words here, that you are referring to a specific paragraph if they want that. This, people, is why it is so important to focus on the question words and the keywords in the comprehension. Let's look at some troubleshooting. So this is at the bottom of your notes on page 2. What do you do if you do not understand a word and they ask you to define that word? Okay? The first thing you ask yourself is this a positive word or is it a negative word? This usually helps you. Even if you just write down, this is positive about something, you might even just get 1 mark out of 3 or even 1 mark out of 2. So ask yourself the question. Let's practice one. So I've used the word primitive. I'm sure that many of you know what this is. But think to yourself, does this sound like a positive word or a negative word? Negative. It's negative, okay? So this is why we should practice. Okay, a negative word. What about the word consensus? Negative. That is a difficult one, but it is positive. Okay? So, in other words, we have to use a little bit of instinct here. What about the word frantically? Negative. Okay, that is obviously negative. So this helps you just place yourself, okay? The writer is trying to be positive about something. So what kind of positive emotions do I get? I get positive emotions like tenderness. I get positive emotions like joyfulness. I get positive emotions like excitement. Or, okay, negative emotions. Okay, if the writer is trying to be negative, is it negative like he's angry? Or negative like she's sad? What type of negative feeling do I get from this word? And that usually helps you to at least get 1 mark. The other thing that you can also look at is the context. So the context will usually help you to figure it out if you cannot define it yourself. I wish we could practice, a bit more on this, but unfortunately we cannot. But fortunately you know how to prep your cake. So you're going to go home and you're going to practice this at home. So there are also some rules that we have to deal with when we look at our comprehension. Some of the rules is that there is a specific mark allocation. Okay, so you have to look at your mark allocation. People, reflect on yourself. If you are giving an answer to something that is 3 marks and you've written 1 sentence down, surely you must realize that this is not adequate enough. And then the other rule for comprehension is that you have to use your own words when answering. Unless they ask you to quote, and they almost never ask you to quote. Unless they use the word diction, which means word choice, you never quote. You always interpret it yourself. So even if you write something down and you change the order of the words, that's better than copying from the text. You are going to get 0 marks if you copy from the text. You have to use your own words. Okay, I'm going to speak more about using this when we speak about transactions. Yes?
Miss, say the mark allocation is 3 marks, but I write like a paragraph of 10 sentences. Is the examiner going to mark everything, or do they mark a certain number of sentences?
For English home language, I know, I've marked paper 1, they have to mark everything. So on the memo it says they mark holistically. That means everything. Okay. I know that in some languages it is slightly different, and your teacher would have alerted you for that. I'm thinking specifically about first additional language Afrikaans. I know first additional language Afrikaans, they read for points. So in other words, if you have made 3 points and the mark was 3, they stop after 3. But for first additional language English, I have not marked this personally, but a colleague of mine has. They have to mark everything. Everything that you've put down, they will mark. And they will mark your pencil as well. Be careful for paper 1. Paper 1, sometimes they're a bit strict on pencil, but I know for paper 3, they will mark your pencil as well. Okay. This idea that the markers at the end of the year are very negative and they want to take marks away from you, this is not true. They are constantly told, we are constantly reminded that there is a student behind the paper. We are constantly reminded to mark everything you've presented. There was a question over there? Yes?
So you said if a question says I'm going to use your own words, and I use exactly the same way to write it in passive form, like mark right or wrong.
Yes, but the thing is you are not going to get any kind of total mark. They are trying to see that not only can you read, because you are illustrating that you can read, okay? But they're also trying to see that you can understand. So reading and understanding is needed in order to get the total for that question. One more.
And would you advise answering question 1 first or last?
I always advise question 1 first, but this is why preparation is important. So you need to be able to look at yourself and look at your own strengths and see, perhaps I'm someone who always gets 10 out of 10 for the summary. I'm someone who always gets an advert or a cartoon high marks for that. I always get high marks for language. If that then is your focus, then I would advise you to do that. But the thing is, you write in the morning, your brain is fresh, you have a lot of time, and that is why, because of the huge components of this paper, I would advise you to start this one first. One more, and then I have to move on.
So, if let's say you start with question 5, language, and you don't start with question 1, do you advise us to use the 10 minutes reading time for the comprehension, even if you're not going to start with it?
Okay, so let's say you start with question 5, then logically I would say still allocate 10 minutes for your time whenever you do your comprehension. Look at the watch that they've got in front and use 10 minutes to read. Okay, so you adjust according to yourself. Again, prep, key. What if you are slow? What if you are a slow person, slow reader? So what? You have 55 minutes. You do what you can in 55 minutes, you move on, and if there is time, you come back. Okay? Don't panic because you're slow. What if you are a fast person? And I know that there are many fast people here who just want to get it over and done with. Why are you fast? You have to sit there for 2 hours. Why not use your full 2 hours? And then what if you overthink? Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. In other words, you take 2 breaths and you focus on your recipe. What is your recipe? Your recipe is underlining the keywords, going to the question word, looking at the mark allocation, reading aloud. Okay, so once you start overthinking, you say, name, stop this. 1, 2, keep it simple. What is the keyword? What is the question word? Let me read it aloud. Let me refer back to the paragraph. Let me look at the mark allocation. Pen in my hand, I answer. What if you underthink? And I'm sure there are many underthinkers here. Okay? An underthinker, the best instrument is to have a pen. If you've got a pen in your hand, it's like something magical starts happening. And you're focused. If you underthink, do the keyword thing. Okay. Let's move on to summary. So here we are focused on. So this is the next slide, the next paper. Here we are focused on getting 10 out of 10 for the summary. 10 out of 10? It's possible. I promise you it's possible. In order to get 10 out of 10 for the summary, you have to know how we mark the summary. So perhaps write a few notes here for yourself. How is the summary marked? The summary is marked 7 points for 7 facts. 3 marks for language. Now, contrary to popular belief, this language does not refer to grammar or spelling. You can be the worst speller in the whole of the exam room. You can be the worst speaker of English, and you can still get 3 out of 3 for language, because the language refers to the quoting, but specifically something we call quoting verbatim. Okay, so another important point that you can make sure you've got down: if you are writing first additional language English, you are writing in point form. Your instructions say write in point form. You're using your instructions to help you here. But for home language learners, you write in paragraph form. This gives us a bit of a cheat in home language. It means we can combine multiple points into one sentence, and we can write as many points as possible. So even though our instructions say 7, I am here to tell you that the summary you will get at the end of the year will have 10 points in it. 10 or more. Last year, 11 points in the summary. Year before, I think there were 9. The year before that, 13. There are more than 7 points in your summary. I'm hoping that some of your brains are going, so that means if I'm writing in paragraph form, if I'm not bullet pointing, I can include everything that I think is a point, even if I might be wrong, but I can still get 7 points because they have to mark the entire summary. The limit for home language is not 7 points. The limit for home language is 90 words. That's it. First additional language is different. Here you have to write 7 points. Unfortunately, no cheat there. Okay. So, what does it mean to quote verbatim? Here I'm speaking about the language. Let me just quickly put a brief timer on here. Here I'm speaking about the language that you use. To quote verbatim means to quote everything word for word. Everything word for word. For example, if the original text says, to be a leader requires effective communication, and your response is, a leader requires effective communication, have you quoted?
No.
You have not quoted verbatim. You have changed one word, and therefore you get the mark for the point, and you still retain your 3 language marks. Here is a nice cheat for all of us. It means that we don't have to think very hard for summary. It means that, just like on the computer, you click, drag, right-click, copy, paste. That is what they're testing for the summary. They are testing, can you copy and paste? They're not testing reading and understanding, which is what they do with comprehension. They are just testing, copying and pasting. And this is why you will find your strongest students do the worst in summary, because they think too much. You do not have to think a lot with summary. You have to copy and you have to paste. So this is the very big danger that I want to alert you to. And this refers to, at the top of your notes here, I have something that says, what is something you should avoid when dealing with the text? And what you should avoid is changing the meaning of the words. People, if you quote everything in your summary, you can still get 7 out of 10. Huh? But if you change the meaning, you will lose the mark completely. So, for example, to be a mentor requires effective communication. Will this get the mark? Is a mentor and a leader the same thing? It's not. It changed the meaning, and so the students lost their marks because they tried to change the key words. Unfortunately, you think that you're doing a good thing by changing the keywords. You're not. So my suggestion is, do not change the keywords. Change the sentence around the keywords of the point. Okay. So I've already done this. The tip for first additional language and for home language. Home language, our aim is no longer 7, but 9. 90 words, not 7 points.
Ma'am, at my school, every English teacher says that if you quote 4 consecutive words, then it's considered birthday.
I understand why they've said that, but when they mark, the entire sentence has to be quoted. Okay, so you will see that some sentences are very long in your summary, some sentences are very short. The rule is that from the start of the sentence to the end of the sentence. So we essentially on our side, if you ever look at the memorandum for this, you will see exactly how the teacher has to mark. So Google the memorandum once you've done it, and you will see they've got a block that says quoting verbatim, and the entire sentence is in that block. So we who mark the summary have to check that we literally have to check that you've quoted every single word in that entire sentence. So understand why your teacher has said that. And I'm not saying that she's wrong in doing that. She's trying to avoid you losing the language marks. But the perspective that I'm coming from is from sitting down and actually marking thousands of summaries and knowing that that rule is actually redundant. I used to teach my pupils the same way before I marked paper 1, and I realized that I'm actually disadvantaging them. I'm making it more difficult for them, and they can get 10 out of 10 if they use the keywords a lot easier than changing it. Okay, so measure what you've heard from me and what you've heard from your teacher. Why don't you keep the keywords but change the words around it? Then you've kind of pleased me and you've pleased your teacher. Okay. Okay, I have to move on to the rest of paper 1 so that we can talk about paper 2. I have got a few rules here, but you do not have to write them down. In actual fact, what I've included for you to study later is something that says how to ace the summary. You see that? So that you can use to study later, and this is something that you can read through for yourself the night before you write paper 1, just to remind yourself of everything that I've said to you today. Okay, so let's look at the visual literacy. Here I'm speaking about adverts and cartoon, and I want you to think for a few seconds. Who created the advert and the cartoon in the text? Is it your teacher who created it? Is it the examiner, the person who sent the paper? Or is it an actual advertiser or an actual cartoonist who created it? It is. C. This tells us that someone is making money off of that advertisement. Someone is making money off of that cartoon. It was published in a newspaper. They make a salary from it. People, that means the advert is effective. Whether you like the advertisement, whether it appeals to you or not, it is effective. It tells you that the cartoon is funny. Whether you think it is funny, whether it suits your humor or not, it is funny. Someone made money off of it. Your trick is to find what makes it effective. Okay, so here I've also given you a picture from the paper that you're going to work through, and I've given you some tips. We do not have time to go through this, but fortunately it is in your notes. So when you are looking at an advertisement, look at the background. In 2020, we had the hardest English paper that we've had in probably 10 years. So just imagine those poor pupils. 2020 and a very difficult paper. You can, for your own curiosity, go and look at it. The summary, for example, was, I think, 20 words longer than it's meant to be. The comprehension was 30 words longer than it was meant to be. And the advertisement that they included was not a good one, according to me, but very effective. If you look at the background of that particular advertisement, the background gave 2 marks, and everyone ignored the background because we always focus on the foreground. Look at the background. Look at the birds. What is she standing on? She's standing in a wheat field. All of these things can contribute to your understanding of the cartoon and the effectiveness of the visuals in the cartoon. So do not neglect the background. Of course, you have to look on the foreground, and of course, in this case, the foreground is the focus. Here they are selling jeans, and they are selling to, I would say, young to middle-aged people. So I'm thinking probably 18 to 30. Obviously, women, and a particular type of woman, someone who likes to be stylish and comfortable, etc., etc. So that's the first tip that I have for you. Look at the pictures, background, foreground, think about what are they focusing, think about what are they selling and who they are selling to. Then if we go to the next paper in your notes, we're looking at page 4. Here we are looking at our cartoon. Some of the tips that we have for cartoon. Try and figure out what kind of humor are they using. What body language and what facial expression are they expressing. Again, unfortunately, people, I cannot go through this thoroughly with you, but look at frame 2. Look at the body language. I can bet my bottom dollar, in other words, the 2 cents left in my bank account, I can bet that they're going to ask a question about the body language in frame 2. Okay? and contrasting the body language frame 2, frame 4. Then look at the facial expression of frame 3. Again, we can bet that they're going to ask something about the facial expression, contrasting the facial expression from frame 1 to frame 3. Okay, so look at these things, that will help you. And then, again in your notes, I have included a little block of all the visual effectiveness of an advert, as well as the verbal effectiveness of an advert, which is called diction. So sometimes they'll use the word verbal, sometimes they'll use diction. There's a list for you to study, and I've done that for both advertisements and cartoon. You must know this off by heart, okay? You must know that a technique that an advertiser will use is the emotional appeal. A technique that an advertiser will use is imperative language or commanding language. They will use rhetoric language. They will use sound devices, personal pronouns, humoristic devices. They will use statistics. They will use gimmicks. You must know this off by heart, so that when they ask that question, and they will ask the question, what is effective? You can say, the emotional appeal is effective because of this, this, and this. Or if they ask, what technique is going to be used? Then you can say, the technique of using personal pronouns. So if you know all the different techniques that an advertiser will use, you will be able to get 3 out of 3, because that question is always 3 out of 3. Same with cartoon. A cartoonist will use body language. Always they will ask body language, or they will ask facial expression. A cartoonist will use different fonts, different symbols. They will use register, the way we speak. So all of these things, you know them off by heart, and you're able to answer your questions. And then what I have also included for you is the humoristic devices that they could use in a cartoon. So I've given the list to you, and I've also said what they are. Know what these are, so that when they ask you, what is the humor, what is funny, what is effective about the cartoon, you can say, well, it is effective because it makes use of irony. It is effective because it makes use of satire. You know this, you know it off by heart, and you're able to use it because they will ask you a question about the humoristic devices that are used in a cartoon. Last thing is your language. Oh, I just wanted to say for home language, what they've started doing is they've included between 3 to 4 marks of the adverts in the cartoon. They have included language questions there. So just make sure that you are aware of that. So how do I prepare for language? This is now the final question. Here I've given you a checklist, which you can use at a later stage. Here, you are not spending hours studying for language. Why do we not spend hours studying for paper 1? Because we do not know what they are going to ask. Because English has millions of words, millions of parts of speech, millions and trillions of sentences that can be converted from active to passive voice, direct to indirect speech. We cannot spend hours studying when we do not know what they are going to ask, and when ultimately all of this is 1 mark. Active and passive voice, max will be 2 marks in your paper, maximum. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't prepare for it? No. That is why you use the checklist and you see, do I know the parts of speech? Would I be able to answer these questions? Yes. What is a prefix, suffix, and root word? Let me quickly go check. Okay, no, I've got it. Am I able to change the form of a sentence? No. I've forgotten how to do this. Let me quickly go back to my English book, go back to my notes, look on the internet to see how to do this. Okay, I've got it. You don't spend hours studying the things that you know, you revise the things that you do not know. Of course, first additional language, you spend a lot of time in grade 12 doing language. So you are fortunate. You simply follow your teacher's notes that she's given you. Your language component counts 20 in your paper. Unlike home language, only 10. Well, 14. Okay. So that is paper 1. You can have your cake.
And eat it too.
And eat it too. Okay, so now we're going to speak about paper 2. What metaphor do you think I'm going to use? Paper 1, cake. Paper 2? No, you cheaters, you're not allowed to. Okay. I'm speaking about a good tackle. Okay. Yes. A good tackle is what you use when you deal with paper 2. Think for a second. Who's tackled someone before? Okay. So, I don't know if I should call you fortunate or unfortunate. Maybe the rest of us who haven't will see in the future. I don't think I've ever tackled anyone, but I can imagine, because I can use my imagination, what it must be like to tackle someone, okay? Someone is tough. They've got bones, they've got skin, they've got muscle. That impact force must be tough to hit, okay? But just imagine going with all that force. I'm running up, I'm preparing myself, I'm pushing onto that person, but instead of hitting the person, I miss. All that force means I make contact with the ground. We do not want to miss our target. So, here, when you make a good tackle, you have to run up to your target, you get into position, and then there is contact acquired. So what is the run-up in paper 2? Learning. Write it down. Write it there for yourself so that you remember. The run-up to paper 2 is the learning. How do you get into position for paper 2? You read the instructions of paper 2 the day before your exam. Lucky you have a paper 2. And then what is the contact? The contact is the reading time you are given in the paper and the actual writing of the paper. Here you will see a flip. The flip is less preparation than paper 1, more learning for paper 1. So paper 1, our emphasis is on preparing ourselves in all the ways I've mentioned. But in paper 2, you have to learn. So the majority of the notes that I'm giving you for this is strategies on how to learn.